or mooty markets are not for the squeamish, but from the sights and smells of tons of indigenous plants and herbs to the piles of animal parts, they offer cures for just about every ailment, from cancer to impotence. Among the rows of baboon feet, vulture heads, lion, lizard and snake hides, we find what we have been looking for. Bags bursting with conical scales belonging to a prehistoric creature called the pangolin, an endangered wildlife species that has earned the unfortunate label of the most trafficked mammal we've never heard of. Special Assignment has embarked on a journey to investigate the plight of the pangolin. It will take us from mooty markets to scientific laboratories, through rural villages to urban courts, from Gauteng to Mpumalanga and Limpopo. The ground-temic pangolin is one of 4 species of African pangolin that is indigenous to South Africa. It is found in the Northern Cape and Limpopo. The other 4 species are found in Asia.
The one we're familiar with is the Temminck's ground pangolin, also known as the Cape pangolin or scaly anteater. Its distribution is from the Northern Cape Kalahari type sandveld to the bushveld regions, the Kruger National Park area, the Limpopo River area, Mapungubwe, Northwest Province.
Accompanying me on this investigation is SABC cameraman Sipho Mnguni, our Special Assignment investigator Sipiwe Linda, and conservationist Alexis Creel. She is experienced in rehabilitating many wildlife species. They include critically endangered white and black-bellied tree pangolin pups that were hand-reared at Sanga Lodge in the Central African Republic before being released into the rainforest, back into the wild.
We were on duty 12 hours a day for 6 weeks, 7 days a week. I just knew what a rare experience it was going to be, a rare opportunity to work with these animals that are vulnerable or endangered and on the brink of extinction. It became a very personal thing for me, and it's a species I'm entirely committed to and will continue to do whatever I can to protect them.
Creel has partnered with Special Assignment for this investigation, providing us with access to pangolin experts such as Professor Ray Jansen, who chairs the African Pangolin Working Group. This is a non-profit organisation established in 2011 to research, raise awareness and lobby for greater protection of the species. This prehistoric creature is over 80 million years old, and yet very little is known about it.
They're mostly nocturnal, they're elusive, they're quiet, they don't make a noise, they're territorial, they don't occur in groups. They're just incredibly difficult to find and to count and to estimate numbers. And we can with great confidence say the numbers are dwindling at an alarming rate, considering one female has 1 pangolin pup every 1 to 2 years, more than likely only every 2 years.
The pangolin's plight is in fact a global one. Of the 8 pangolin species worldwide, the 4 in Asia are already classified as critically endangered. The 4 African species are rated as vulnerable. But all 8 varieties are listed on the International Union for the Conservation of Nature's Red List of animals threatened with extinction.
Exactly the same as the Asian rhino and Asian elephant. They're sourcing for an easier commodity on the African continent.
It is a trade driven on the supply side by poverty and opportunism, on the demand side by greed. Each year, an estimated 100,000 pangolins are snatched from Africa's bush and smuggled to Asia, where demand by increasingly affluent consumers has spiked unabated. There, pangolin meat is considered a delicacy, and their scales allegedly cure every condition from acne to cancer. They are trafficked dead or alive, fresh or frozen, skinned or camouflaged by legitimate cargo. In July this year, Hong Kong Customs seized over 4,000 kilograms of pangolin scales hidden in a container labelled sliced plastics from Cameroon. This represents up to 6,000 pangolins, the largest seizure of pangolin scales in 5 years. More recently, in August, Indonesian authorities seized more than 650 pangolins found hidden in freezers. But these busts represent a minuscule percentage of the scale of the burgeoning trade in this species.
About 1 million pangolins have been traded illegally in the past 10 years, although this figure might be an underestimate, especially because the level of trade out of Africa is still relatively unknown.
The commodity chain for pangolins is exactly the same for rhino. The small guy on the ground, probably a month's wage, $100. Then it goes to the middleman, where you've got an exponential increase, probably 1,000% increase. Then it's to restaurants in Vietnam, pangolin fetus soup, $2,000 a plate. Then it goes to the large commercial Chinese herbal factories, not yet the shops, but the factories in large cities such as Hong Kong that manufacture these remedies, and then it goes out to the herbal markets at probably another 1,000% increase. So although you may exchange one scale for 50 Rand in markets in Johannesburg, that scale can be worth up to $100 to $500 in China.
In 2016 alone, almost 14,000 kilograms of pangolin scales from Africa were seized in Asia. One can only imagine the volumes that have slipped through the nets of law enforcement. Yet despite the fact that the pangolin could be trafficked and literally eaten into extinction, it has remained under the radar of mainstream conservation campaigns. Yet now, among hundreds of other endangered species, the pangolin has been accorded one of the centre stages at the largest wildlife conference in the world. Known as CITES COP17, it is the 17th conference of the parties to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. The conference commenced on the 24th of September and runs until the 5th of October.
We want the poaching for our lions, our elephants, our rhinos, our pangolins to all stop, because this is our heritage, and we want our grandchildren and their grandchildren to see the rhino and the elephant and the pangolin.
Conservationists have been lobbying furiously for the status of the pangolin to be upgraded from Appendix 2 with restricted trade to Appendix 1 with a total ban on all trade.
There are a number of proposals to uplist all 8 pangolin species to CITES Appendix 1, so all 4 Asian species as well as the 4 African species.
The proposals for and against will be heard during the conference, and the debate will be heated.
We need to, as a government protection services that are offered from the police, from NGOs like ours, from researchers, we need to give out a strong message that pangolins are untouchable. Certainly in Southern Africa. It's a no-no, it's a hands-off, and we need to speak from one voice.
Did you know that Vilakazi Street is the only street in the world to have housed 2 Nobel Prize winners? Vilakazi Street in Orlando West, Soweto, southwest of Johannesburg in the Republic of South Africa, has been home to Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Nelson Mandela's house was a modest family house from 1946 and still maintains those features. Archbishop Desmond Tutu still owns his house in Vilakazi Street since 1975 and often goes to stay there when visiting Johannesburg. Because of its popularity, the street has an influx of tourists. Restaurants with local cuisine have mushroomed around it, creating job opportunities for the locals and improving the lifestyle in the area. Orlando West High School in Vilakazi Street is known for its creative role during the famous 1976 uprising.
The South African market for pangolin still revolves mainly around traditional healing, followed by a much smaller trade in bushmeat. We want to find out the effect of these cultural practices on the pangolin, so we have travelled to Bushbuck Ridge in Mpumalanga to visit a respected Sangoma in Acornhoek. This is one of the many rural areas facing a crippling drought and high rate of unemployment. Traditional medicine plays a major role in the lives of rural communities living here.
Ikhali ayisosinyana ne nawo 2005
The last time I got a pangolin was in 2005. It was given to me as a gift. But in 1993 I bought one for 500 rand. It is such a special creature that you are lucky if you see one in your lifetime.
The pangolin falls in, together with lion and elephants as just one of those iconic creatures. There's something about the actual character of the animal that draws it into folklore, that then draws it into the traditional medicine market, which I think is beautiful. It's part of the culture.
Conservationist Rob Brains has extensively studied the significance of the pangolin in traditional African culture. His research spans South Africa, Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and includes visiting muti markets and sangomas in both urban and rural areas.
The pangolin side was always difficult because when we started looking at it, it had already become difficult to find pangolins.
In African culture, the pangolin is also associated with rain, fertility and good fortune.
There's an African proverb that talks about how a pangolin goes through the clouds and the scales rasp together, and that's what causes thunder. And so if you wanted your children to be protected and not be scared from thunder, they'd get a scale. That's more of a rural sort of story, that they're given. Those are the scales that get passed down. Also, because the physical attribute of a pangolin when they're in trouble is that they curl up. And because they curl up and they get protected, if you have a pangolin scale with you, one of the beliefs is also that if you have it with you and you get hurt, you didn't get hurt as badly as you would have because you had your pangolin scale.
The pangolin's scales and its tendency to curl up in a ball when threatened protects it from every predator, except man.
Akhwari loko yi xihina la a yi dlayiwi somara.
The correct way to kill is to put a sack over it and make sure that its blood doesn't spill onto the ground. If you kill it incorrectly, it prevents the rain from falling. That is why we have had a drought here for so long.
Indeed, Mpumalanga and Limpopo have been drought-stricken for several years. Much of the land looks parched, as though cursed, like the Sangoma believes, by the wrongful spilling of pangolin blood. The drought has also made endangered wildlife even more vulnerable, not only to starvation, but to poaching.
This year we're going through an extremely bad drought. A lot of your more nocturnal animals in a time of drought spend a lot more time looking for food and so on, so they spend longer times out, and you see more nocturnal animals during the day than you normally do. You'll see driving around there's very little grass, so it's very easy to see a pangolin now.
And yet sightings of pangolins are becoming increasingly rare.
I've been working in this area 25 years. I've seen more pangolin with poachers than I have out in the wild walking free. You don't see these animals.
And increasingly there is a split between rural and urban, between tradition and modernity, belief and science, faith and commerce.
In rural areas, small, minute quantities. If you need it, they'll go and find it. But in Joburg, you can get whatever you want because there's so many people. It makes it very difficult, and you can't study the two. But at the same time, you have to, because you need to know the dichotomy between the two. And it's interesting because it's a cultural split, but it also changes the way that you look at the sustainability of what's being used.
As a species listed under CITES Appendix 2, the pangolin is classified as vulnerable, but limited trade is allowed. We asked the Gauteng Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, as well as the province's environmental management inspectors, also known as the Green Scorpions, about the enforcement of the legislation.
Currently, the only thing that you would be allowed to, if a permit would be issued, and that would be under assessment of how you acquired a pangolin, would probably be trade in pangolin scales. We haven't actually had any applications for that, and I'm not sure how it would be handled. But what would happen in that case is that the application would be sent to our scientific services for their input, and also, of course, to the National Scientific Services, which is SANBI, for assessment to see whether the activity that is being applied for would be sustainable and would not be damaging to the animal. And of course, currently most muti operators are not within the law. They don't have permits for the activities, but it doesn't mean to say that they don't want permits. I think to be fair to them, they're very often not aware of legislation. And so to expect of them to know that there's a legislation is a little bit unfair.
The department is planning awareness campaigns, but also intends clamping down on the illegal trade.
We've realized that most of the things that are being sold in the big multi-markets in Gauteng do not occur here in Gauteng. They come from somewhere. So what we're planning to do now, as I was talking about the project that we're busy with, we will address those things to say we can actually shut the supply down. So we're looking at that, we're getting intelligence and everything together. So in due course, we'll be able actually to deal with all the people that are supplying these multi-markets, if they're doing that illegally.
But surely ancient cultural beliefs involving the small-scale harvesting of pangolin scales, blood and fat for muti purposes can hardly be deemed as a major threat to the survival of the species.
There is a way of softening the scales and then grinding them down and mixing the powder with traditional medicine to treat cancer and open wounds. You can also grind down the meat and smear it around the yard to ward off evil spirits.
When we speak to these tribal leaders and we tell them these animals are going extinct and being lost forever, there's great concern.
Without the pangolin, I can still use crocodile skin and indigenous trees to do the same job.
They would prefer a pangolin, let's say, for certain instances, but they also would like to see their trade preserved in the annals of Southern African history. And that heritage is more important to them than ruining an entire population. And it'll be a tragedy to stop a culture just to save an animal. At the same time, it'll be a tragedy, in the other way around as well.
To be African is beautiful. To be African is a privilege.
It represents hard work. It represents being able to stand on your own.
And respecting other cultures as well.
It's about promoting African heritage.
We are all Africans. Let's come together so that we can have a formidable force.
Our cultures interlink with one another.
And by standing together and embracing one another, there's power in unity.
It is time to cut off this issue of xenophobia.
I stand for African unity. I stand for promoting unity in Africa because
there are many opportunities
to be whatever you want to be.
Africa is one of the most important continents.
Because if we can come together as one, we will be able to actually build a better Africa, the new Africa for the future. And if we unite our hearts and our minds together and we go forward, we will conquer.
So let us all arise and be proudly African.
Being an African is who I am right now.
I'm proudly African. I love Africa.
Wishing you all a very happy Africa Month.
One love.
We are one of the 22 high burden countries, and out of that we're number 6. Following countries like India, China, and with huge population.
Cough, night sweats, weight loss and fever. And cough being the most important of those. So, and especially if the cough lasts for more than 3 weeks, then you really have to worry and get tested for TB.
The motivation is to affect behavior change, particularly with people who cough and who may be carrying the bacterium. So encouraging people to use the elbow.
For more on health, join your host Dr. Selo Motaung every Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m.
A recent sting operation in Limpopo. 3 men nabbed for possessing a pangolin and attempting to sell it to an undercover operative for tens of thousands of rands. The pangolin rescued, alive, and subsequently released.
looks fine. I said to him, it's fine, you can bring the money, we've got 3 guys here, because that is very important to establish how many guys are there, in case anybody is armed and it ends up in a shooting match or something.
Louise Joubert runs a sanctuary for wildlife in Limpopo.
The problem is that poaching is spreading across the African continent like a wildfire. It's getting worse by the day. It has also changed in South Africa, particularly from originally subsistence poaching, with somebody trying to feed a family or trying to put some food on the table, to full-out commercial poaching.
She says it's not only poaching that is decimating South Africa's pangolin population.
It's also the intensive game breeding projects that are really decimating pangolin numbers, because they are electrocuted on the game fences and the tripwires and stuff surrounding these farms. And I don't believe that there's too much interest from the private game industry to conserve the species, because it just becomes another victim or another statistic.
It is estimated that up to 1,000 pangolins are accidentally electrocuted on the lowest electrified wires of game and livestock fences in South Africa every year.
The only way I can sum up fences overall and the damage it does to most of our wildlife, and the pangolin gets hit specifically hard, is when you've got a person who owns 1,000 hectares with a game fence. When you drive with that person around his reserve or farm, call it, he'll say, that's my impala, that's my zebra. When the fences come down and it becomes part of a bigger conservancy, you drive with the person, he says, look at owl. It takes that ownership of its my impala away, and that ownership is very detrimental to our wildlife.
Pangolin survival is also being threatened by deforestation and competition with humans over habitat. But by far the biggest threat is the illegal trade, conducted by middlemen, driven either by opportunism or poverty.
Being the middleman is more important these days than being the actual sangoma, because those are the guys who can get anything. At the same time, the middlemen don't harvest sustainably, so that's where your whole sustainability gets thrown out the window, because they'll just take whatever they can get. But you do get a lot of guys becoming middlemen.
Because it rolls into a ball when threatened and doesn't make a sound, the pangolin can simply be lifted up, thrown into a bag and transported undetected.
And if you can put some parts in a suitcase on a taxi from Maputo to Joburg, it's rather simple.
To learn more about the illegal trade, Special Assignment Investigator Sipiwe Linda visited several Muti markets, posing as a customer. At one of them, he's offered pangolin scales and body parts to cure his ailments. But the young trader, who is clearly not a practicing sangoma, then offers to travel to Mozambique to fetch a live pangolin, at a hefty price, of course. He says white people like to buy them as pets. He says it will take about 2 weeks and claims to have dealers near Maputo who will provide him with the illicit cargo. He insists on a substantial deposit up front as surety. Our investigator then puts me in touch with the middleman.
2-3 weeks.
Yeah, we get it from Mozambique. We have a dealer outside. Yeah, we need to contact that dealer and we buy it from that dealer, so we transport it from Mozambique to South Africa.
Do you do this a lot of the time, or you're just doing it for me?
No, only once. I only did it for somebody else, only 2 people. That other people didn't come when the pangolin was here. Yeah, and it takes time, the pangolin dies.
Don't be tempted to say, I'm rescuing the animal and hand over money. Rather become involved in the project to arrest those individuals so that we can track back to the kingpins that are paying those guys to go out there and collect them, and the money filtering back to the kingpins and the middlemen. And let's stop the problem where it starts, way back at the point of origin, rather than just catching the smaller guys on the ground, because there are thousands of them. Lots of people that are starving and that find that doing illegal trade in wildlife is a quick way of making money.
But clampdowns on this illegal trade are also on the rise. In Limpopo this year, there have been 7 arrests.
The last guy we arrested, he was looking after his cattle and he found it in the field. All right, he picked it up, put it in a bag, kept it for a week. We managed to get an agent in, they made a deal, and the police force were there with us, and we arrested the guy. The chap before that, who wanted 200,000 rand for the pangolin, he had it up in just north of Palabora, and he was shopping around. He had been to a number of people, and eventually bumped into one of our guys, and we were able to set up a deal.
ProTrack is a private anti-poaching unit. Established 25 years ago, in the last few years, it has had to deal with a dramatic spike not only in rhino poaching, but also in the illegal pangolin trade.
There's a market starting. The word's out, a pangolin's worth money.
Recently we had a case where we arrested 4 guys who were trying to sell a pangolin. So we charged them for possession as well as for selling of a pangolin without a permit.
The last 3 pangolins that were found were probably from Zimbabwean origin, because the people that were involved in the illegal trade and possession were Zimbabwean, and most probably they found the pangolins in Zimbabwe. So another problem then is that our borders are so porous.
Last year 2 tons of pangolin scales came out of Maputo. So that is a large corridor, and there are lots of Chinese people working in Maputo, working in Zimbabwe and working in Africa. And it's easy for them to purchase pangolin because that's relatively cheap. It's $20 to $25 for a pangolin.
They rape in Africa, from Central Africa right down to here. They want our minerals, they want our wildlife, and they don't give a damn about South Africans.
But now, through COP17, South Africa is in the spotlight, and some of it will fall on the pangolin. But is there time? Or could this prehistoric creature still be wiped out before most people realize it exists? Or tragically, partly because of that?
The world will be watching Joburg later this year. It's a huge platform. There's been a lot of media interest. And I think if we can put pangolins on the stage there, it would be a wonderful opportunity to broadcast the plight of these very, very romantic little mammals.
You have a sense that things are slowly moving into place, and that we could win the war against the extinction of the species.
We're trying to save an animal that nobody knows about. And so the avalanche that we talked about with the ivory and rhino horn that you'll see coming, I'm scared that it'll hit the South African conservation fraternity like a tsunami.
At 6 o'clock Central African time, a very warm welcome to SABC News Prime Time, coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. I'm Tabile Ngwato. These are tonight's top stories. Outgoing Public Protector Thuli Madonsela's report on the Bapo Bamogale community's missing millions expected in the next couple of months. The death toll in Haiti soars as the country awaits aid following Hurricane Matthew.